All right. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today. We have quite a large group, so I am going to jump right in to just be mindful of everybody's time. Uh, if you have not been to one of these before, the format is we'll typically kind of go through content for about 35, 45 minutes and then try to leave plenty of time at the end for questions. However, don't let that stop you. If you have a question, a comment, something you think would be helpful, or something you just really want to know, please don't hesitate to post in the chat. We will be monitoring that throughout the presentation. And you also can feel free to unmute and just ask your question live. So with that, I am going to jump right in. So just a quick background on Paragus IT for anybody who's not familiar. We've been around for about 25 years. We are located in Hadley, Massachusetts, with our second office now in Worcester, Massachusetts. And we serve about 150 small businesses that range anywhere from as small as 5 employees up to almost 2,500 employees. For those businesses, it's our job typically to be their entire IT department. But for some of our larger clients, we are supplementing some internal IT that the team already has on staff. We are about 75 full time employees now, split between those two offices, and continuing to grow each year. Our core purpose, as we like to say, is this idea of making IT fun. And that's a large part of kind of what we've brought you here today. And it really is a large part of these webinars. It's the idea that we don't think IT should be so overwhelming or intimidating or frustrating that it's not accessible to everybody. And one of the things that we really try to do for our clients and for businesses considering working with us is helping to make IT feel more approachable, more accessible, helping you to see how you can benefit from it to empower you to be more effective in your jobs and in your businesses. And today's webinar could not be a better example of that. Our goal today is really to help you understand how some of the AI tools, some of the early tools that are on the market available to you, could help you immediately improving your business. So let's talk a little bit about why we are here. Everybody is fully aware of all the hype that has come out since ChatGPT was released. ChatGPT is a very low cost, potentially even free, very powerful AI model that allows people to do things that used to feel impossible. AI as a technology has been around since 1967. And I think there's a little bit of contrast there that's worth just calling out. This is not a new thing, but the emergence of making it accessible to everybody, making it so easy to use, and that's what we're going to show you today, is a large part of what's driving the hype. But there's still a gap. There's still a gap of people who maybe have signed up for ChatGPT or maybe used it once or twice, or maybe they've played around with an image generation technology, but they're far from using it on a daily basis. And they're also far from experts at using it in a really effective way. And that's really the goal here today, is to try to close that gap a little bit, try to make you a lot more proficient at using some of these tools that are out there and helping you understand some of the use cases that you may want to put into practice. So I want to start with just a quick question, and you can feel free to post your answer in the chat or just kind of raise your hand using the gesture. But I'm curious, how many people have used ChatGPT at least once already? So it looks like the majority of people have used it once. How many people are using it on a weekly basis? Decent number of hands. How about on a daily basis? Keep your hands up if you're using it daily. All right. And keep your hands up if you're using it a few times a day. You're using it almost hourly, maybe every other hour. Okay. So there are a few of you, but by far now we're getting down to kind of the vast majority. I'm sorry, the vast minority, the kind of exception to the rule. And that's kind of what I want. It's what I expected. I think that's kind of the norm. I think everybody had kind of a natural curiosity and has played with it once or twice, probably mostly for fun. Maybe they had it write a storybook for their kid. Maybe they just kind of played around with it to see what it could do. Maybe they asked it, "Are you going to take over the world?" That's like one of the most common requests that ChatGPT gets. But what we really want to do is figure out how do you start to use it hourly, get you to a place where this is just like an extension of you. And that's what I want to work on today. The other thing I really want to work on, I think this is probably where there's the greatest opportunity for learning, is how your prompts look. So I'd be curious for those of you who are using ChatGPT on any kind of a regular basis, is your typical prompt greater than 50 words? If so, raise your hand. We have maybe one, maybe two, maybe three. What about, is your typical prompt greater than 200 words? Keep your hand up if your typical prompt is more than 200 words. Zero. So I think that's really what I hope you take away from today, is if you get nothing else, what you want to take away is that the quality of your ChatGPT response is going to be driven entirely based on your prompt. If your prompt is sub 200 words, it's probably not a detailed enough prompt. So I'm going to go over this a lot more in repetition and kind of walk you through it, but that's the one lesson that I'm hoping you leave here today. And I want to help you understand a little bit more about why that is and what that looks like. All right, so let's start by just debunking a myth. I know that we've all heard a lot of hype about AI taking our jobs and making humans useless. And I think it's worth just understanding what exactly AI can do, but also what it can't do. While I cannot forecast rather where AI is headed in the future, what I can do is I can speak to where it is today and kind of what it can do. Today, it's a very powerful tool, but in a very limited scope. So, in terms of like how we think about AI, part of what makes it confusing is it's a little bit like cloud computing. The term means so many things to so many different people. And if we just throw everything into this bucket that we call AI, it actually can confuse the subject and it can make it harder to understand. So, what we're predominantly going to talk about today is what's called generative AI. And that's the thing that you're probably seeing in the news the most often. That is the technology that drives something like a chat GPT. So, if we just kind of separate it down a little bit, if we just talk about generative AI and what it can and can't do, um, I think that's going to help us understand a little bit about where this fits into our lives. Now, the first thing to understand about generative AI is it's been around for more than a decade. The first version of AI was back when we had those flip phones and we were texting, and the phone would try to auto complete the word for us based on how many times we pressed the letter or the number two, trying to guess whether it was A, B, or C we were trying to click on. That was in very, very early form of generative AI, where basically you're asking the AI to fill in the blank. You're saying, here's what you know, you're trying to guess what comes next. We see this all the time when we do Google searches. So we start trying to type into Google and it auto completes what it thinks our search is, even if our spelling is terrible, which is, the more advanced version. And based on who we are and what location we're in, we're going to get different results. So if I was to start typing into Google a search, and so did everybody else on this call, we would all get different autocompletes because Google's using a lot of interesting AI to guess at what we are looking for, which has now been individualized down to the person. Whereas maybe 5 years ago, we would have all gotten the same result because the AI wasn't that advanced. But the technology was there, it's just gotten better and better. And the reason it's gotten better and better is because the data set, the amount of data the AI has access to, has gotten better and better, and the speed of computing has gotten faster and faster. As we continue to amass more data and the speed of computing increases, we can do more with AI. And we hit this incredible tipping point when ChatGPT launched. What it really signified is we were at this tipping point where there's enough data available, free, accessible information, and computing has come down in cost and gone up in speed so much that we can make a tool like ChatGPT available for the masses for very little money, for free even. That was what happened that caused this huge explosion of AI and why we're all talking about it, why we're all excited about it. But it has not been, it's not like it just was invented 5 minutes ago. It really is a concept that's been around for a long time that just hit this very critical tipping point that's caused it to kind of explode. But here's the thing, while it may seem like AI, especially generative AI, which is what we're talking about today, may seem like it's really smart, in reality, it's not. And that's a very, very important lesson for people to learn. The AI is not intelligent. It's very good at what it does, but that does not make it intelligent. It is immensely useful. In fact, I think it's probably one of the most useful technologies that's been invented in the last 100 years. But you need to know what it is and what it isn't in order to use it properly. So let me just show you a quick demonstration of what I mean. I'm going to pull up ChatGPT 4.0, which is the latest version of ChatGPT that is publicly available. I'm going to do a brand new chat and I'm going to ask it what we think of as maybe a simple question. How many states in the US have a capital that starts with the same letter as the state? Now, many of us know the answer to this question from third grade when we learned it, but let's see if ChatGPT does. There are not 8 states that have the same US capital. As we can see right here, Topeka and Kansas do not both start with the letter T. Neither do Frankfurt in Kentucky, Baton Rouge in Louisiana, Boston and Massachusetts. There are four. Four is the correct answer. However, what we are continuing to see is the limitation of what ChatGPT can and can't do. And this is what's really so important. It is not intelligent. It can't do critical thinking. It can't answer complex or even relatively simple questions that involve critical thinking because what it is an autocomplete. It's trying to guess what word comes next. It's trying to fill in the blank. It's trying to play Mad Libs. It is not able to do any level of critical thinking on a data set. So you can't quite say, analyze this data and give me an answer, but you can say, analyze this data and summarize it for me because you're operating within a language model as opposed to a critical thinking model. And I'm going to demonstrate this a little bit more as we go today, but I just find that this is a great example. I do this test maybe once a month just to continue to see has it gotten smarter yet. And so far, it still can't answer a simple question. So in terms of like us fearing for our lives and worry that AI is going to take our job, until it can answer this question, I think we're all safe. But it is still an incredibly powerful tool, as we're going to demonstrate for the rest of this presentation today. So what is it? What can it do? And how should we be using it? That's really what I want to explore. So the way I would suggest that you think of AI is imagine that you hired a team of very smart, highly educated experts who have the skills and experience and knowledge to take a tremendous amount of work off of your plate. I want you to think of ChatGPT as your personal bench of employees that you have hired to help you do your job. They have access to all the information that is out there, and they're very, very good at using that information to get you results very, very quickly. That's kind of the mindset I want you to have about AI, and I think it's going to serve you well. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't still have to be smart yourself. This team can give you good information, they can help you make decisions, they can make recommendations to you, but they can't ultimately answer questions. As we just proved, you would not want to let the AI answer a logical question that requires critical thinking, nor would you want to allow the AI to make decisions for you. The AI is your research team. They can give you good information, they can help educate and inform you, they can help you save time, but they're not the decision making body. You still need to be the one to ask the right questions, interpret the results, and make the decisions. So, the other thing you have to think about is if you're imagining this as a team of people that you've hired, just like if you actually hired a team of people, you still need to make sure that you've provided the right amount of context in the form of setting clear expectations, goals, desired outcomes Furthermore, you need to remember that this team just started yesterday. You just hired this team. I told you that we just gave you this team, which means they don't know you, they don't know your business, they don't know your style, they don't have any context, any history, which means that unless you give them that, they're not going to perform their task very well. And again, I want to keep coming back to this analogy because I have found it serves me really well. If I think of ChatGPT as a team of 5 to 6 people, researchers who are there to help me do my job, but they just started yesterday, I have to give them all the information they would need to be able to do that job for me if they were human beings sitting in a conference room. And if I put myself in that mindset, I tend to be much better at writing the prompts that I need to write to be able to generate the right results. And that's really what we're trying to get into. So, using generative AI requires you to provide all of that instruction. Think of it like this: each time you're going to ask AI to do something, it's kind of like calling somebody into your office, asking one of those brand new experts that you just hired. In addition to giving them the task, you need to give them the context they will need in order to do that task. If you hire an expert and you ask them to design a job description for you without providing any background on the role or your company, the odds of that hire giving you a job description that's of any value is very low. But if you take the time to give that expert the context, the background, they can likely perform that task very well and potentially even better than you could. All right, so let's take a look at some of the things that AI can do for us. And for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to focus exclusively on ChatGPT, including a couple of plugins for ChatGPT, but I'm not going to introduce any of the many other tools that are out there. That's not to say those tools don't exist, but I'm just going to focus on ChatGPT predominantly for the purpose of this conversation. All right, so give me 1 second. The first thing we're going to do, and this is important, is anytime you want to start a new conversation with a new one of your experts, imagine you've got your team, you want to call one of them into your office. The first thing you do is you need to start a new chat because everything that happens in that chat is going to be context for that task. If I'm talking to my researcher versus my HR person versus my brand ambassador, I need to have a different persona for that person and different context and information. So think of each chat almost as a different member of your team that you're going to have conversations with so that you can have a fresh slate for that conversation. So just in the interest of time, I'm going to use copy and paste to put text in, but I'll kind of do it in pieces so you can see what I'm doing. So the first thing here is I'm going to give some context to ChatGPT of who I want their persona to be. I've asked them to imagine that they're an expert recruiter with 20 years of experience, 10 years in consulting, 10 years in operations. I want them to think like a Harvard MPA, and I want them to be an expert at recruiting for the last 5 years in the state of Massachusetts in the IT space. Now, I bet a lot of you are not starting off your prompts with this kind of context, but it's very, very important. You want to set the tone for the responses you're going to get. Because remember, it's fill in the blank. It needs to know there's a million ways it can fill in the blank, but a Harvard MBA who's got 20 years of experience is going to fill in the blank differently than if I don't give any instruction, or if I said, you're Snoop Dogg, fill in the blank, tell me what that would look like. And we'll see that a little bit later just for fun. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give a lot of information about what it is that I'm asking for. So I'm going to do this all in the same prompt. So I haven't hit return yet. So the next thing I've got here is I'm telling it about the company. We're Paragus IT, 20-year-old company, 60 employees, 2 offices. We're growing. We're splitting an existing role into 2 separate roles. We filled one with an internal candidate, but we need help filling the other. The new one is going to be called Director of Professional Services. I told it a little bit about our company's focus is what we do. I talked about who we serve, how many customers we have, what it looks like. I even told about our purpose is to make IT fun, which and what that means to us. I'm really giving it a lot of context. And again, if you go back to the analogy, if you just hired an expert and you asked them into your office, this is the kind of instruction you would give to them. You would say, I need you to make a job description. Here is the information you need to know about the company and who we are and who we serve in order to make me a job description. Otherwise, what are you going to base it on? You're just going to guess and it's going to be wild and it might make sense, it might not. So this context is really vital. So then I'm going to go on and tell it a little bit more about kind of what we offer in terms of a company. So I'm just going to use shift return to space down a little bit. I'm going to say that we're an employee owned company and that these are the benefits we offer. We have our amazing ESOP, we have unlimited paid vacation, we have comprehensive healthcare and very low employee contributions, comprehensive professional development opportunities, lots of free meals, snacks, and drinks, and we have 401k matching. And then finally, I'm going to give it an overview of the role that I want it to make a job description for. So in our company, we have these documents called role docs, which summarize for us what a job description, or I'm sorry, what a role is. And so I'm just going to paste the raw text of that right into the prompt. And I'm not going to go through all of that right now, but what you can see here is if I scroll back up, I said an overview of the director of professional services role is, and then I just copy and pasted the content. I didn't worry about reforming it. I didn't worry about like rewriting it into the form of a prompt. I just said, look, here's a data dump of how we think about the role. And the way we format these is title, what I do, why I matter, my success metric, my accountabilities, and we describe what all the accountabilities are. And then we describe what success looks like for the role, both from a perspective of doing it well and crushing it. And I'm not going to worry about spacing or formatting or changing this at all. I'm just providing this as context, the same way I would if I was giving this to an employee. I'd say, here's a description of the role that I need you to make a job description for. And then I'm going to ask. So I'm finally going to tell it to do something. What I'm saying is I'd like to start off by writing a comprehensive and detailed job description for this role. And you're going to notice if you pay close attention, I use the word comprehensive and detailed a lot, or the words, I should say. It, like a human, will sometimes try to be lazy. If you want detail, you have to ask for detail. If you want it to be comprehensive, you have to ask it to be comprehensive. It will look for shortcuts, and I'll show you a couple of times where it's going to try to cheat, and I'm going to make it not. But you really need to be very specific about what you want. I want detailed and comprehensive. Don't give me 3 bullets. So I'm finally going to hit enter after all that prompting. Reading everything I just got it, running that through the computer. It'll start, should be generating. I'm not sure. Apparently it hasn't had its coffee yet either. Here we go. So what it's going to do is it wrote for me the job description, which is what I asked it for, an overview of the company, summarizing all that information I gave it, telling it where the location for the job is going to be, providing an overview of the role, listing out what the key responsibilities for the role are going to be, documenting what the success metrics would be for the role, talking about kind of who it'll be working with, and then listing the benefits that Paragus offers. Then it's going to list the qualifications that it thinks are necessary for this role. And it's going to talk a little bit about why somebody might want to join Paragus. So this is not necessarily going to be 100% of what I'm looking for, but the goal is that this just got me to 90%, maybe even 95%. I can spend a little bit of time revising and cleaning this up and then posting it versus starting this document from scratch. But let's go a little bit further with it. So the next thing, and this is why it's nice to have things in a nice clean chat. So I don't need to repeat any of the context. Now I can just keep prompting it. So the next thing I'm going to ask it to do is to create, and you're going to see the words detailed and comprehensive again. I want a detailed and comprehensive evaluation matrix in the form of a table using rankings 1 through 5. For each ranking, I want to give a detailed evaluation methodology. So this is how we're going to rank candidates as they apply for the job. And so what it's making for me is a nice little table here, listing out the different criteria, giving me what it would mean to rank from 1 to 5, so that as my interview team is working on this, they can use this as a guide to help them figure out and rank resumes, stack candidates as we go through the interview process. And you can see here that it's deciding, it's using what I've provided to help it understand what it thinks is going to be important to the role. For example, it picked out that client relations are important, and it gave us 5 different levels of what client relations would look like in the case of good to bad. And then it's giving me this kind of ranking summary here for the evaluation methodology, so I can give that to my team so they know what to use when ranking from 1 to 5 beyond just the descriptions that are included in this table. And I would just simply hit copy on this table. There's a button to do that. And I could then share this with my team. And this would be the matrix that we would use to review candidates. So the next thing I'm going to ask it to do is I'm going to say that I want it to help me come up with interview questions. We're going to have a team of people interviewing this person, and I need help coming up with the interview questions. So, just in terms of speed, I'm going to give you the context. So, I said we're going to have 3 rounds of interviews. First is going to be with our VP of talent, who's going to be assessing culture. And then I gave it our values, because if you're going to assess culture, you need to know what our values are. So, I gave it our core values. And then I gave it what we call our code of excellence. Again, just copy and pasted raw text, didn't format it. Then I said the second round is going to be with our chief operations officer and director of services, who's going to assess technical skills. And then our third round is going to be their CEO and our DOSC, who's going to be assessing strategy. Please design a comprehensive and detailed interview panel for this role. For each panelist, please give us at least 10 questions we should ask to properly evaluate the candidate. Now, remember, it knows the candidate profile, the job description, it knows this evaluation matrix it just created 5 seconds ago. So now we're saying, okay, give me interview questions that are going to help me get through that interview to help evaluate the candidate against that methodology, but in the way that we want to do it. And so here's the cultural fit assessment with the VP of talent. It's giving me the questions for them to ask. Then it's going to go through the technical and skills experience assessment with our COO and director of strategic services. And then it's going to go on to that third round, which is really about strategy and fit with team. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to ask it to do is I'm going to say, in order to present this over to the board, I need to know what are all the KPIs and KRIs for this role, and I want it to create them using a balanced scorecard methodology. If you're not familiar with that terminology, it's something that came out of Harvard maybe 6 or 8 years ago. It's a very effective way to create KPIs and KRAs. So I'm going to ask it to give me that. I want it to be detailed and comprehensive, of course, and I want at least 5 points per quadrant. So it's now going to build that for me. So what it's doing is it's taking each of the major aspects of the role and it's giving me KPIs and KRIs for each. So it gave me one on financials. It's giving me now one on customer. Then it gave me one on internal processes. Now it's writing one for learning and growth, because it already picked out of our other documents we've provided that those are the areas we want it to pay attention to. The next thing I'm going to ask is it to make me a website. So I'm going to ask it to make me a website in HTML5 using JavaScript and CSS to promote this role and attract great candidates to apply. I'm going to ask it to give me the code for a 1-page HTML5 website that includes all the CSS that I need. And by saying include all the CSS, I'm making sure it doesn't give it to me in 2 different files, which that makes more work for me. I'm going to say that all the navigation needs to work. Each section should have at least 100 words. And please do not tell me to insert here, because if you don't tell it that, it will try to get lazy and just tell you, oh, put some copy here. And I'm giving it our company colors are green and black, and our existing website is here, which you can review for more information. So what you're seeing here is ChatGPT has the ability to actually write code. In this case, it's writing HTML5, which is the kind of code that most websites are built in. So what you're seeing it do here is write the actual code that would be needed to publish a website for this role. So if I wanted to have a dedicated page just for this job posting that I was going to link to from LinkedIn and job boards and other places, I now have a dedicated website just for this role. All I would need to do is paste this code into a website hosting company, and I would have a website. And you can kind of see it's giving a role overview. It's listing out the core values of Paragus. It's taking all the information from this entire conversation. And this, and you think of a chat like a relationship with an expert. All the context it has, it's using, not just the last thing I asked it to do. And so it's able to borrow from some of that and help me give something that's going to be helpful. Now, what you're going to find, just in case any of you have ever tried this, is you're not going to be able to ask it to look at a live website like I did without a special plugin that allows it to do so. ChatGPT is based on a data set that only existed up until a certain point, and it cannot browse live websites. But there's a plugin you can get that allows it to go externally and pull links in, which is what it did for me here. So it could pull in any colors or images that I wanted to from the Paragus website. So the next thing I'm going to ask it to do is I'm going to say, thank you. We have received a CV for this role. I want you to do a comprehensive analysis, providing us with all the pros and cons, as well as give me a detailed recommendation. And I'm going to just take this sample CV here from a biomedical engineering student. I am just going to copy and paste it in. You're going to see that it's gross. It's going to be really badly formatted. I'm not going to try to fix that at all. So now what it's doing is it's analyzed that resume and it's attempting to match that resume against its knowledge and criteria for the role that I've given it so far. And it's starting off with some pros. It's now giving me some cons, including this candidate's from Utah. They have no experience with landscape in Massachusetts. They have no technical expertise. They have no managerial expertise. In other words, this is not the candidate for the role, which makes sense because this is a bioengineering student and I asked it for a director level position of professional services. But that's kind of the idea, is just to give it some context. So it's saying there are significant gaps when it comes to requirements of the director of professional services role, but it's trying to be friendly and say there are some good things here too. So maybe you'd want to give them a second look. If I gave it 6 resumes though and asked them to stack rank them, this one would not get stacked rank very high. Now, again, I want to be very clear. This is a tool. It has many flaws. You would never want to use this as your only tool. You would still want to have a human being look at those resumes and get another opinion, a human perspective. But this can be a very powerful perspective that can also add some good data into the conversation. All right, so just kind of continue on. I'm actually going to shift gears a little bit. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to ask ChatGPT to write a letter asking this candidate to apply for the job. And I'm going to tell it to use anything that it thought was a pro in doing that to try to entice the candidate to apply. So it's writing my letter in a very professional sense. It's thanking them for their interest in joining the team. It's going to talk about why we think their resume might be a good fit for Paragus, and it's going to give them, some warm and fuzzies about maybe reaching out and actually applying for the role and considering working for us. But now I want to point out something. If I asked it to do that exact same task, and I made this joke earlier, but to do it in the tone of Snoop Dogg, this is why setting tone matters so much. So the exact same email, all the same information. The only thing I've done is change the tone. you get a very different email to that candidate. And I think this is where a lot of people are absent in not providing a tone is generic. It's going to sound completely vanilla. It's going to sound totally without any kind of personality. But if you give it a tone and tell it how you want it to approach the task, you're going to get a good result. In this case, a very different result uh, than what you saw here. A very professional, very kind of standard letter that looks like it was written by a Harvard MBA to Snoop Dogg asking what's crack-a-lackin'. So it's just a very, very different approach, but that's why the tone matters so much. And that's why I wanted to make sure we included that. Um, and then the last thing I could do is, let's say that this is the first time we're expanding our team and I'm realizing that the board wants kind of a recruitment policy that I need to send out as a memo to the board from a legal perspective. Let's just say maybe I haven't done one of those in a while. So I'm going to ask it again we're back to the Harvard MBA. And it's going to say, in light of the company's growth, we need to attract talent. I'm proposing the following recruitment policy. And it's going to summarize the entire policy using some common sense, but also using all of the context of our conversation so far and how we're going to do this. I would then send this out to my board and make sure that we were all in agreement about how we're going to approach recruitment at the company to make sure that we're practicing good diversity practices, that we're not discriminating, and to help them understand kind of what the schedule of events is going to be, what's going to happen each week of the process, and really get the board on board, or my executive leadership team or my management team, with what the recruitment process is going to look like for this hire. So I'm going to leave this conversation for a minute and totally shift gears. But hopefully this gives you a sense of, from an HR perspective, what some options could look like. I'm now going to change the persona, and I'm also going to change the plugins that I'm using. So I want to use that one. I want this one, which means I'm going to give up this and I'm going to pick up this. Okay. And I don't have time to get into plugins right now, but plugins are a really powerful way to make ChatGPT more powerful. So here's my new prompt. I'm just going to copy and paste this in, and then I'll walk you guys through it. Okay. So this is another one of my experts, totally different persona. I'm bringing in a totally different member of the team now to help me with a different task. I just got to get the right content. Okay. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, you're a well-educated CEO of a startup that is operating a cannabis dispensary. You take your work seriously, but you also love to make jokes, and your communication style has been described as disarming and informal. In the coming months, you're going to meet to raise additional money in order to open up 3 new dispensaries. However, right now, you need to update the existing investors and the board of directors on how things are going. Below is some data that you got from one of your current stores. Please interpret the data, analyze it, and provide a summary of key findings that can be shared with the board and current investors. And then I just dumped a raw table of data. And literally, this would be like an Excel spreadsheet. You copy and paste it in. You can see it formats it awfully. Don't worry about it. It'll figure it out. Okay, starting to talk back. And what you're getting is a summary of that data. And again, tone matters, right? So we've got medical's got the munchies. It's trying to be playful, but also informative, right? So it's still trying to make sure that it's saying the medical marijuana retail sales have generally been higher than adult retail sales. So it's giving me context that is valuable, but it's doing it in a fun, playful tone because that's what I asked it for. I asked it to kind of give it a little bit of a personality to it. And this would be a letter that I could send out to my board, my investors. And again, would I want to edit it? Yes. But is it going to help me save a lot of time? Probably. So the next thing I'm going to ask, and this is an area that I think people are very unaware of the capabilities, this does require a plugin. But what I'm asking it to do is I want to prepare a letter that can be shared with prospective investors to entice them to want to invest using your analysis of our data and the content of this video. And I'm asking it to watch a YouTube video. In the letter, please invite them to attend a prospective investor dinner on October 3rd at the Marriott in Springfield, Massachusetts. So I'm going to tell the AI, use what you know, but also go watch this video and learn, and then write me a letter that I can send out to people who might want to invest with me. This plugin here called VoxScript is what is empowering it to be able to go watch that video and use the content of that video. Now it's writing a letter to my prospective investors. So it's telling about what our sales have been so far, a little bit about that data. It's also now talking about this video I asked it to watch, Warren Buffett on weed and why you should invest in cannabis. And it's highlighting some of that video and talking about what's powerful and helpful in that video. Taking the key takeaway from the video is important to due diligence and understanding the high risk reward nature of this video, as it points out. And then it's going to get right into, hey, come to my dinner on October 3rd at the Marriott in Springfield. Fantastic opportunity to dig deeper. So it's helped me kind of go from, I've got a whole bunch of shit I need to do today, to I've gotten a whole bunch of stuff checked off in a fairly short amount of time. We run this webinar for about 40 minutes. In that time, I've gotten a lot of work done. And I'm not saying I don't need to review this and fine tune it and perfect it, but it's a pretty powerful tool in order to make me more efficient, more effective. Now, let's just say that I need to get ready for that meeting because I'm trying to work only one day this week. So the next thing I got to do is make me a PowerPoint presentation, give me at least 15 slides, sell the investors on why this investment is the best investment they can make, be very optimistic, make it clear that we're only looking for the best investors and can be very picky, use charts and graphs. Now I'm going to use another plugin, and you can see that here. I have a plugin called Slide Maker, which has the ability to create PowerPoint slides, which is not natively built into ChatGPT. So whenever you do something that isn't built into ChatGPT, the plugins help you kind of expand the capability. And that's what this plugin is going to do. And I'll say it works like 80% of the time. So if it has an error, we'll just ask it to do it again. Some of this stuff is changing so quickly that it does have problems from time to time. You just kind of have to accept that, just like a brand new member of your team is going to have problems from time to time, and you're going to have to coach them or help them. Put it in the same bucket. Except ChatGPT doesn't take sick days. It doesn't call out. It doesn't ask you for a raise. It asks $20 a month pretty consistently. It's a pretty fair price for what you're getting. All right, so I got my PowerPoint. It's giving me the outline here, but while it does that, I'm also going to download the PowerPoint itself so I can show it to you. Now, this particular tool that I'm using, it's fast, but it's not very beautiful. There's better tools out there that can make much more pretty presentations. But what this is going to show you is this is a Microsoft PowerPoint slide deck, and it built this with an agenda for the meeting. I asked it for 15 slides. It gave me 15, but it included the intro slide and the agenda slide. So I may have to tell it next time that doesn't count. Then it's going to give me the market overview, growth story, financial highlights, why they should invest with us, perfect investor, sales analysis, on and on and on. And so it's really a high level bulleted presentation. I would fill it in more detail, and I can ask ChatGPT to be more detailed. I could go back and say, I want you to include this growth chart or this forecast, or I want you to make a growth chart that shows us growing by 20% a year and include that in the PowerPoint. For the purpose of this demonstration, just because it takes a little bit longer, I didn't do all of that. But it gets a sense of like, I just went from an idea to a PowerPoint in a few minutes, not even. And that gives me a huge advantage in terms of the amount of time it's going to take me. So I'm going to stop the demonstration component there and go back to our presentation so that I can wrap up and open it up for questions. So I think my final thoughts on this are, this is a very, very, very powerful tool. If you're not using it and other people are, you're going to feel it. And the analogy that I have found resonates with a lot of people is, imagine that your job was framing houses. That was your profession. You were in the business of framing houses. And whether you're literally the guy swinging the hammer or you're the CEO of a house framing company, let's imagine you're in the industry of framing houses. If you frame your houses with a hammer and a nail, and that is how you frame your houses, you're going to have a certain speed and quality and cost for you to do projects. Your labor is going to be higher because it takes longer. You're going to deliver projects at a set time frame based on that labor, based on how you're doing it and your methodology, and your quality is going to be whatever. And I'm not saying anything is right or wrong, but you will have a price, a quality, and a timeline or a speed at which you can do your work. Let's imagine your direct competitor uses an air compressed nail gun. Think about how much faster and cheaper they can build the exact same house. The quality is probably going to be the same. Maybe it's a little better. It's arguable. Who really cares? Once you put the sheetrock up, you won't see the nails anyway. But are they going to be able to do it faster and cheaper? Yes. I don't think anybody can argue that if a nail gun is framing a house versus a hammer, the nail gun is going to do it faster and therefore cheaper. The incremental cost of buying the nail gun compared to the labor savings is astronomical. So they're going to beat you in terms of speed and price. That is how I want you to think about using ChatGPT or any other AI tool. But again, the purpose of this conversation, we're using ChatGPT. If you're not using ChatGPT, you're framing the house using a hammer and a nail, knowing that other people in your company, in your industry, in your market are using a nail gun. They're going to now be able to do things faster and cheaper than you're able to. And if you insist on continuing to use a hammer and nail while they are using a nail gun, you are going to start to notice a competitive disadvantage. You're going to start to find that other companies are able to outbid you or outpace you in terms of their deliverables or beat you in quality because they have a tool that is available to you too, but is also available to them, and they're choosing to use it and you're not. Or they're using it better than you're using it. And that's kind of how you really need to be thinking about this. It's not magic. It's not, it builds the house for you. You still have a very professional carpenter who knows what he's doing, who knows how to build a house, who knows all the construction laws and the codes, who has to buy the lumber. The difference is the tool that person is using to build that house has been upgraded significantly in terms of speed and efficiency. That's how you want to be thinking about this. Your same team doing the same work, but using better tools to make them much more efficient, therefore faster, and also able to potentially do it at a higher quality in a lot less time. That's going to translate to lower cost or higher margins, depending on what you do with that savings. And the real important question, the thing you really want to be thinking about, is what are you going to do with that return? So now you're able to do things faster and better. Great. The question that I think is most exciting is what are you going to do with that additional capacity that you just freed up? The boring answer is you're going to cut payroll and become more efficient. And maybe that's the case, but that's actually not the norm. The norm is that businesses are taking that new capacity that they've freed up and they're deploying it to do more important work, spend more time with customers, more time growing the business, more time thinking creatively, and less time writing boring emails and creating job descriptions and making PowerPoint presentations, which frees them up to be better, which allows the business to grow faster, be stronger, serve more people. If you're a nonprofit, have a bigger mission, take care of your employees even better. I don't necessarily like the analogy of thinking of this as a payroll reduction tool because I don't think that is the right methodology. I think the methodology is this frees up resources to work on other tasks and potentially allows you to lower your prices and serve more customers, which allows you to grow your business. That's I think, the much more optimistic and positive way of looking at it. And I think it's well aligned with what the opportunity is. So I promised I would leave some time for questions. I am happy to pause my monologue there and open up the floor for any questions from the audience. Feel free to post in the chat or just unmute.
Hey, Delcy, great presentation. When I've heard that ChatGPT has like a limitation in regards to how up to date the information is. Does that vary depending on the subscription that you have?
So if you look at ChatGPT, without any plugins or additions, there is a limitation on the data. The data is set as of a fixed point in time, and you can look up exactly what that data is. I can't remember off the top of my head. I want to say it's like 2021, but it's a very specific date in 2021. So, for example, there was a student who asked it to write a paper on the history of abortion rights in America. And it was unaware that Roe v. Wade was overturned by the Supreme Court. And that paper was not a very successful paper when the teacher reviewed it because it was missing a pretty important historical milestone in that conversation.
Sure.
So you do need to be mindful that without the addition of plugins or providing additional context, like you could give it, hey, here's some information you don't have that you should consider in your analysis or when you write my paper for me. But there are plugins that allow you to expand that. And then Microsoft does have a pilot program through Bing, which is live data, where you are actually talking to a chat GPT technology using the live internet. It is not nearly as sophisticated or powerful because they've had to dumb it down in order to handle the fact that the data is constantly changing. Because as you can imagine, these companies are terrified of ChatGPT telling somebody something really dangerous. And so it's a little bit more filtered down because it is using a live data set. So it is available. My recommendation is to stick with ChatGPT 4, pay the $20 a month, get access to ChatGPT 4. And then if there's context you need it to have that doesn't have, like you saw me, I made it watch a YouTube video. I can go make it read a website. I can give it additional context I want it to have that it doesn't natively have to fill in the blanks and help me get something further along.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. How does ChatGPT coincide with the idea of plagiarism when it comes to questions regarding research? Yeah, so I mean, this is one of the most hotly debated things, and there's a lot of different aspects to it. So there's the educational component, like kids writing papers or not writing papers. That ship has sailed. Like the education system was broken. It's been broken for a long time. ChatGPT is just shining a giant spotlight on that and saying the way we do public education and higher ed education is just broken and needs to be reinvented. And this is going to make that, it's going to force that issue in some ways. Teachers are no longer able to send a kid home and say, on your own, write a paper from scratch, make a bibliography, cite these references. Like, unfortunately, AI is just kind of making that a very different equation. I don't think it's actually unfortunate. I think fortunately, I think it's going to accelerate the way that we do education change, which has been so needed. It's also happening in medicine. Medicine has been stagnant for so long, and AI is finally forcing some change. But the medical industry is so much more regulated that it's happening slower. The education industry is regulated, but not as regulated, so it's happening a little bit faster. But I think those are both good changes with some bumps in the road along the way. The bigger question is from a rights standpoint. And this is where if I was to ask AI to make me an image or to make me a song, I have to be aware that in order to do that, it's using copyrighted material as its influence. So it might make me a song that is actually very, very influenced by 45 other songs that other artists have written that are copyrighted material. And there's a big question in the industry right now, in the music industry, but also in the visual industry, around whether there should be any kind of compensation to the artists whose work influenced the product. Now, the counter argument to that is every artist that exists today is influenced by decades of work, and they're not giving rights to those people either. It is a very difficult conversation, and I do not know where that's going to land, but it is a hotly contested item right now, is to understand where those lines are around copyrighted material. Today, it's the Wild West. Everything goes. There are very, very little restrictions. There's some people suing ChatGPT trying to have their content removed from the data set. There are ways, legal ways that you can go through if you want your stuff scrubbed out of the data set. But by and large, it's a very, very complicated topic. And I think we have a long way to go to see where that goes and how we're going to figure that out. For now, you can ask ChatGPT to cite its sources. I will tell you it's very, very mixed about how well it does that. Oftentimes it can't, or it gives you the wrong information. You can experiment with it and play with it. And this is one of the issues of the AI is when they built the algorithm and set it free, it learned and learned and learned and learned and learned. So when it's giving you an answer, it's not necessarily a direct line back to a data set. It's a data set that has been evolved and evolved and evolved and evolved. And so it's a very squiggly line. But this is one of the critiques or criticisms of AI today is there's no transparency into a relationship of the answer and an original set of data that it's based on. And this is where we start to get into bias and discrimination and all kinds of issues that are present in AI today. And this is where Congress is very quickly trying to catch up, which is almost just there's a huge amount of just kind of like humor in the fact that maybe the most technologically inept people in the world are the ones trying to very quickly write legislation on how to make AI more transparent. It's a very, if you listen to some of these debates and hearings, they're just a little bit hilarious if you know the language, you know what they're talking about. But we are getting there. We're trying to make progress. I think we're going to get to a point where there are clear definitions and rules and regulations. But today it is a little bit of the Wild West. You are kind of out there just exploring, experimenting. And so be careful with that. Some people you'll notice will just put at the bottom of something, disclosure, this was written with the aid of ChatGPT. That is a little bit of a just kind of like a general, like, if I screwed something up, I'm really sorry. But it's not a great answer. Tyler, go ahead.
Yeah, not really a question, but just wanted to mention also that Photoshop just recently released publicly the generative AI feature, where you can just type in a prompt in Photoshop and it will generate a content aware image in the marquee box.
Yeah, that's in. There's a lot of great technology out there. I don't think. Let me see if I have any queued up to show you guys right now. Um, I don't have any right now that I can instantly pull up, but there are plugins for ChatGPT you can get that will allow you to do image generation. And what, to Tyler's point, what you're starting to see is the big bot players, the ones who've been around forever, who are worried about, oh my God, we're going to lose our entire company, are starting to adopt AI quickly, and they're starting to include some of that technology in their tools. So if I'm a graphic designer and it's my job to make an invite for this webinar, rather than starting from scratch, a blank white screen, and having to design everything, I can ask PowerPoint or one of the many other image generators that are out there, say, hey, I'm looking for an image that's like a guy at a computer. He's feeling frustrated. There's storm clouds behind him. He's got smoke coming out of his ears, but he's about to have a light bulb moment. Give me that image and make it like photographic quality, or make it cartoon quality, or make it kind of like a imaginary, like a clip art kind of approach. And it will generate that image as a starting point. And that as a good graphic designer or artist, I can then modify and clean that up and make it just the way I want it to. But it may save me, again, that first 80%. If I can use AI to get me from 0 to 80 and then I have to do 20, then that means that I can spend a lot less time doing a lot more work, or I can just work a lot less, either way. But I can create the same output with a lot less effort because the AI is getting me to that point where I can just apply my creative genius and not have to do the initial, like, oh, I just got to slog through this to get something to react to and start with. So video, music, pictures, text, as we've looked at a lot, analysis, PowerPoints, all of those fields where it's just kind of a little bit of manual work to build something. That's where you're seeing the fastest growth in terms of getting something over the finish line. I want to be respectful of time. I'm going to end our presentation there, but if you have additional questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. We are always happy to talk more about this topic or any other topic, and there will be a recording of this that'll get published to our website. Emily sent out to you via email, that if you want to share with anybody else, you are more than welcome to do so. So thank you again for your time today, and hope you guys all have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Delcy.